The Flower Ornament Scripture, Chapter 39. Then the Buddha extended his right hand, rubbed my head, and revealed to me a teaching called Universal I, which is the sphere of all Buddhas, revealing the practice of enlightening beings, showing the differentiation of the planes of all universes, showing the spheres of all truths together, the light purifying all lands, dispersing all challenges, crushing all demons and devils, making all beings happy, illumining the hidden recesses of all beings' minds, communicating to all beings in accord with their mentalities, illuminating the turning of the wheels of the senses of all beings. And I have taken up that teaching of the Universal I, keep it in mind, apply it, and contemplate it, taking it in this way. Even if it were being written by a collection of pens the size of the polar mountains, with as much ink as water in the oceans, it could never be finished. It would be impossible to finish even a part of a single line, of a single formula, of a single principle, of a single doctrine, of a single chapter of the teaching. It cannot be even partially exhausted, let alone fully exhausted or comprehended. So, son, having taken up this teaching of the Universal I for a full 12 years, taking it up in this way, in one day I master countless chapters by the light of mental command to retain what is heard. I penetrate countless chapters by the light of mental command that is a way of access to tranquility. I plunge into countless chapters by the light of mental command that progresses endlessly. I contemplate and investigate countless chapters by the light of mental command that is imbued with fiery energy. I put countless chapters into practice by the light of mental command adorned with lotuses. I elucidate countless chapters by the light of mental command that is beyond words. I analyze countless chapters by the light of mental command that is a mass of brightness. I arrange countless chapters in order by the light of mental command containing the ocean. Whatever beings come to me from the 10 directions, I direct and introduce them all into this teaching of the Universal I, the manifestation of the practice of enlightened and enlightening beings. To all of them, I elucidate, represent, illumine, describe, show, analyze, expound upon, open up, explain, unlock, and clarify the teaching of the Universal I. I know this teaching, son, but how can I know the practice or tell of the virtues of the enlightening beings who have entered into the ocean of all enlightening beings' practices in accord with pure vows, who have entered into the ocean of all vows to remain in the world through all ages, who have entered into the mundane whirl of all beings, to act appropriately according to their mentalities, who have entered the ocean of minds of all beings, to communicate knowledge, who have entered the ocean of all virtues, to produce the vision of the knowledge of the 10 powers without obstruction, who have entered the ocean of all beings' faculties, to guide them to maturity and perfection with appropriate timing, who have entered the ocean of all lands by carrying out the vow to purify all lands, who have entered the ocean of all Buddhas by the power of the vow to honor and attend all enlightened ones, who have entered the ocean of all truths for the communication of knowledge, who have entered the ocean of all virtues by pursuing their realization, who have entered the ocean of languages of all beings to carry out the turning of the wheel of the teaching in all languages. Go, son, to a place called Sagara Tira, in the region of Sri Lanka, 60 leagues south of here. A monk named Supratishtita lives there. Go to him and ask how a great enlightening being is to purify enlightening practice. Then Sudana, paying his respects, departed from the presence of Sagara Megha. Supratishtita. Then Sudana, remembering that spiritual benefactor's teaching of the Universal I, reflecting on that projection of Buddhahood, keeping in mind those multitudes of statements of the teaching, entering into those oceans of entries into the teaching, pondering that method of teaching, plunging into the principles of that whirlpool of teaching, entering fully into the space of that teaching, clarifying that sphere of teaching, and contemplating that treasure island of teaching, gradually made his way to Sagaratira in Lanka, where he looked in all directions, desiring to see the monk Supratishita. He saw Supratishita walking in the sky, surrounded by countless hundreds of thousands of celestial beings. He also saw the sky covered with clouds of celestial flowers, with the sound of countless clouds of heavenly music, and countless streamers and banners offered by the chief celestials to the monk Supratishita as tokens of respect. He also saw inconceivable clouds of black aloe-scented water thundering in the sky, raised on high by the chief water spirits. He also heard countless sounds of pleasing celestial music and song, coming from the sky with words of reverence and hymns of praise, performed by supernatural beings. He also saw inconceivable clouds of fine cloth spread out in the sky by joyous serpent chiefs out of respect for Supratishita. He also saw inconceivable clouds of jewels set in the sky by the chief titans, with the light of the magnificent array of their inconceivable qualities. He also saw inconceivable hosts of bird girls, standing in the sky with their hands joined in gestures of respect, with non-injury uppermost in their minds. He also saw inconceivable hundreds of thousands of goblin chiefs in the sky, with their retinues, their bodies transfigured, directed there by goodwill toward the monk Supratishita. He also saw inconceivable numbers of demigod chiefs, with their retinues circling in the sky to protect Supratishita. He also saw inconceivable hundreds of thousands of Brahma chiefs in the sky, making salutations, uttering pleasant words of respect and songs of praise. He also saw inconceivable hundreds of thousands of celestial beings of the pure abodes in their palaces in the sky, paying their respects to the monk Supratishita. Then Sudana, seeing the monk Supratishita walking in the sky, was pleased, enraptured, transported, overjoyed, happy. He saluted and greeted Supratishita and said to him, "Noble one, I have set my mind on supreme enlightenment, but I do not know how an enlightening being is to seek the qualities of Buddhas. How an enlightening being is to acquire the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to accumulate the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to cultivate the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to actualize the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to act in accord with the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to assemble the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to contemplate the qualities of Buddhas, how an enlightening being is to clarify the qualities of Buddhas, in order to accomplish all the tasks of enlightening beings, how an enlightening being is to approach and follow the qualities of Buddhas. Noble one, I hear that you give instructions to enlightening beings. Please tell me how an enlightening being is to set to work on the Buddha teachings, not to lose sight of Buddha whatever one is doing, not to lose sight of enlightening beings so as to be always in contact with reality, always to be involved with the Buddha teachings so as to be at one with the roots of goodness of all enlightening beings, always to be involved with the vows of enlightening beings so as to accord with knowledge, always to be involved in the practices of enlightening beings so as to accomplish the task of all enlightening beings, always to be pervading all Buddha fields so as to live continuously through all ages, to remain in the conditional for the manifestation of the projections of all Buddhas, always to be hearing the teaching in order to visit in one's own body the places of death and birth of all Buddhas by the emanation-like action of enlightening beings, and to always be in contact with the light of knowledge so as to receive the teachings of all Buddhas and accord with knowledge of past, present, and future. To this, Supratishtita replied, "It is good that you have set your mind on supreme perfect enlightenment and ask about the qualities of Buddhahood, the qualities of omniscience, the qualities of independence. I have attained the enlightening liberation, unobstructed door. Going in and out of this unobstructed door liberation, practicing it, analyzing it, examining it, investigating it, and clarifying it, I have attained a light of knowledge called ultimate non-obstruction, whereby I am free from obstruction in awareness of the mental actions of all sentient beings, knowing where all sentient beings die and are born, entries into the channels to memory of past states, associations with all beings in future ages, communications to all sentient beings of the present time, knowledge of the conventions of languages of all sentient beings, cutting off the doubts of all sentient beings, comprehending the differences in the faculties of all sentient beings, approaching all sentient beings at appropriate times to guide them to full development, comprehension of time divisions as being conceptual, and in non-corporeal pervation of the Buddha fields in the 10 directions, all by the attainment of non-being, non-abiding, and non-doing. By the realization of this mystic power of non-doing, I walk, stand, sit, and lie down in the sky, disappear and appear, produce smoke and flame. Being one, I become many. Being many, I become one. I become now visible, now invisible. I go through walls unhindered, as through empty space. While sitting cross-legged, I travel in space, like a bird on the wing. I go in and out of the earth, as if in water. I walk on water unhindered, as on the earth. I smoke and flame like a great conflagration. I cause even the earth to quake. With my hand I polish even the sun and moon, those bodies of great potency, power, and light. I envelop even up to the Brahma world in my body, covering the world with clouds of light, the colors of all jewels. I emit clouds in the forms of all beings. Emanating clouds of webs of light of infinite colors, I go forth in all directions. In each moment of thought, I pass one world to the east. I pass 2 worlds, 3 worlds, 100 worlds, 1,000 worlds, 100,000 worlds, 1,000,000 worlds, 100,000,000 worlds, 1,000,000,000 worlds, 100,000,000,000 worlds, 1,000,000,000,000 worlds, countless, measureless, endless, incomparable, inconceivable, incalculable, untold, unspeakably unspeakable numbers of worlds. And in those worlds are Buddhas living, in each of those oceans of worlds, in each of those streams of worlds, in each region of those worlds, in each age of those worlds, in each set of those worlds, in each occurrence of those worlds, in each expression of those worlds, in each medium of those worlds, in each particular of those worlds, in each sacred place in those worlds, in each site of enlightenment in those worlds, in each assembly in those worlds, I go to each of the Buddhas teaching in those worlds with as many bodies as atoms in endless Buddha lands, each body raining as many clouds of offerings as atoms in endless Buddha lands. Going to the Buddhas, I ceaselessly make offerings of all kinds of flowers, fragrances, garlands, unguents, robes, banners, pennants, canopies, nets, and ornaments. Those Buddhas explain, reveal, and elucidate. and I acknowledge and take up all that they teach. I also remember the purity of the Buddha lands of those Buddhas. As in the East, so also in all directions do I go to innumerable worlds, see the Buddhas teaching there, make offerings to them, acknowledge and take up what they say, and remember the purity of their Buddha lands. Also, all the beings who see me, to whom I come, are assured of supreme perfect enlightenment. Also, whatever beings I see, small or large, underdeveloped or well-developed, happy or unhappy, I adopt a corresponding physical form in order to guide them to maturity and perfection in the appropriate time. And all beings who come to me, I establish in this enlightening liberation, which is everywhere at once, and which is the consummation of unerring power. Son, I know this enlightening liberation, unobstructed door, which is everywhere at once engaged in the service of the Buddhas, appropriate to the development of all beings. How can I know the practice or tell the virtues of the great enlightening beings who act on great compassion, who act in accord with the practice of the great vehicle, whose conduct never deviates from the path of enlightening beings, whose conduct is free from attachment, whose conduct always embodies the will of enlightening beings, who always act with the thought of enlightenment, whose action is focused on the way of the enlightened, who always act with the thought of omniscience, whose way of action is like the sky, whose conduct is independent of all mundane realms, whose conduct is flawless, whose conduct is uncorrupted, whose conduct is consistent, whose conduct is faultless, whose conduct is pure, whose conduct is unblemished, whose conduct is free from evil, whose conduct is honest, whose conduct is dispassionate, whose conduct is undefiled. Go south, son, to the Dravidian city Vajrapura. There lives a grammarian named Mega. Go to him and ask him how an enlightening being is to learn and practice the conduct of enlightening beings. Then Sudana again paid his respects to the monk Supratishtita and left. Mega. Then Sudana, mindful of the light of the teaching, steeped in intensity of faith in the teaching, his attention focused on thoughts of Buddha, intent on perpetuating the lineage of the three treasures, remembering spiritual friends, his mind having illumined the worlds of past, present, and future, thinking of great vows, striving for the salvation of all beings, his mind unattached to enjoyment of any created things, praising the tradition of dispassion, intent upon contemplation of the intrinsic essence of all things, firm in the commitment to purify all worlds, sojourning without attachment in the congregations of all Buddhas, gradually approached the Dravidian city Vajrapura, looking for the grammarian Mega. He saw Mega at a crossroads in the middle of the city, sitting on a lion seat to talk about the teaching, elucidating a scripture called Manifestation of Turning of the Wheel of Letters. Sudana went up to him, paid his respects, and said, "Noble one, I have set my mind on supreme perfect enlightenment, but I do not know how an enlightening being is to learn and carry out the practice of enlightening beings. How is an enlightening being to preserve the determination for enlightenment? How does one develop a will that is firm in all states of existence and is indefatigable? How does one purify one's intent in accord with invincibility? How is the power of great compassion produced, so that it never flags? How does one acquire mental command that is totally purified? How is the light of wisdom produced, light free from obscurity in regard to meaning, principle, expression, and presence of mind? How does one acquire the power of recollection, keeping in mind the teachings of all Buddhas without confusion? How is the power of migration purified, illumining all states of existence with the truth? how is an enlightening being's power of concentration perfected, intent on the ascertainment and discernment of the meanings of all principles? Now Megha, out of respect for an enlightening being, got off his seat and prostrated himself before Sudana. Then showered Sudana with golden flowers, precious jewels, and the finest sandalwood powders, covered him with hundreds of thousands of robes dyed in various colors, showered him with beautiful flowers of many various colors with pleasant scents, and honored him with various other offerings, then said to him, "It is good that you have set your mind on supreme perfect enlightenment. One who arouses the determination for supreme perfect enlightenment becomes engaged in the perpetuation of the lineage of Buddhas, intent on correctly communicating the tradition of dispassion, engaged in purifying the family of all lands, directed toward guiding the family of all sentient beings to perfection, engaged in properly accomplishing all the teachings and transcending all things, intent on harmony of all actions, engaged in the fulfillment of all practices of enlightening beings, directed toward preserving the continuity of all religious vows, engaged in following knowledge of all times, active in making devotion steadfast, the focus of attention of all Buddhas, near to equality with all Buddhas, appreciated by all enlightening beings, praised by all sages, honored by all the chief Brahmas, protected by all the chief gods, respected, welcomed, and praised by the chiefs of the various supernatural beings, sought out by all world rulers. One becomes very well suited for putting an end to the three kinds of bad conditions in all worlds, getting rid of all difficult conditions inopportune for attaining enlightenment, getting beyond all states of destitution, attaining birth in celestial or human states, always seeing spiritual benefactors, consistently listening to the lofty Buddha teaching, purifying the will for enlightenment, cultivating the cause of the thought of enlightenment, gaining the illumination of the path of enlightening beings, following the knowledge of enlightening beings, and dwelling in the stages of enlightening beings. This is what I think of such a one. Enlightening beings do what is difficult to do. It is hard to get to actually see them. They are comforts to the world. Enlightening beings are the mothers and fathers of all sentient beings. Enlightening beings are an adornment to the world with its gods. Enlightening beings are a refuge for those oppressed by suffering. Enlightening beings are a place of rest for the protection of all sentient beings. Enlightening beings are the breath of life to those suffering all kinds of terrors and calamities. Enlightening beings are a wind protecting all sentient beings from the heat of the three evils. Enlightening beings are earth, causing the roots of goodness of all sentient beings to grow. Enlightening beings are an ocean, a repository of endless treasures of virtue. Enlightening beings are a sun, producing the light of knowledge. Enlightening beings are the polar mountain, by virtue of the height of their roots of goodness. Enlightening beings are a moon, the moon of knowledge of the essence of enlightenment having risen in them. Enlightening beings are warriors, crushing the armies of all demons. Enlightening beings are heroic, having reached the city of the state of independence. Enlightening beings are fire, annihilating the self-love of all sentient beings. Enlightening beings are clouds, causing vast clouds of true teaching to shower. Enlightening beings are rain, causing the sprouts of faculties such as faith to grow. Enlightening beings are navigators, showing the way on the ocean of truth. Enlightening beings are bridges conveying all sentient beings across the sea of mundane life. Enlightening beings are a pathway to the holy for all sentient beings. Thus, praising enlightening beings to Sudana in such terms, Megha applauded Sudana. While he was saying these words pleasing to enlightening beings, there issued from his mouth a mass of flames that made 1,000 worlds clearly visible, and all the sentient beings who perceived that light came to Mega, illumined by the light. To them their attention commanded by Mega, their hands held forth in respectful supplication, their bodies and minds cooled, enraptured, inspired with reverence, divested of conceit, freed from deception, senses tranquil, Mega expounded and conveyed the teaching of the manifestation of the turning of the wheel of letters, upon hearing which they became irreversible in their progress toward supreme perfect enlightenment. Mega sat back down on the seat of teaching and said to Sudana, I have attained the light of the spell of eloquence. I know the speech of all kinds of beings in a billion-world universe. I know the variety of speech of each kind of being. I know the unity of speech of each kind of being. I know the mixture of speech of each kind of being. I know the terms, speech, and concepts of all creatures. I know the ideas of all sages. I know the ideas of all ignoble people. I know the speech of enlightening beings, expressed according to the mentalities and languages of sentient beings. I enter into and focus on the oceans of utterances addressed to all sentient beings by the Buddhas of past, present, and future. As in this billion-world universe, in each moment of thought, I enter into the oceans of all terms, expressions, speech, and concepts of sentient beings. I do the same in untold worlds in each of the 10 directions. I know this light of the spell of eloquence of enlightening beings, but how can I know the practice or tell the virtues of the enlightening beings who have entered the ocean of what is in various conceptions, who have entered the ocean of the various conceptions and languages of all people, who have entered the ocean of the various conventions of verbal designation used by all people, who have entered the ocean of logical connections of all statements, who have entered the ocean of literalism, who have entered the ocean of designation of all objects of past, present, and future in one object, who have entered the ocean of teaching which is beyond verbal expression, who have entered the ocean of the teaching of the Buddha, who have entered the ocean of explanations of distinct types of statements, who have entered the ocean of explanation guiding the analysis of statements of all truths, who have entered the ocean of speech of all beings, who have gone into the purer rays of all spheres of sound, who are conversant with the ultimate distinctions of the wheel of phonemes. Go, son, there is a country south of here called Vanavasin, where there lives a distinguished man named Muktaka. Go ask him how an enlightening being is to undertake the practice of enlightening beings and become familiar with it, and how the mind is to be observed. Then Sudana, having bowed to Mega and paid respect to the teaching, describing the faith rooted in him, observing that all knowledge comes from following good spiritual benefactors, reluctantly took his leave and went on. Muktaka. Then Sudana, reflecting on that array of light of the spell of eloquence of enlightening beings, plunging into that enlightening being's ocean of principles of speech, remembering that enlightening being's mental purification, undertaking that enlightening being's production of inclination to goodness, clarifying that enlightening being's method of perfecting sentient beings, purifying that enlightening being's knowledge of how to take care of sentient beings, making firm that enlightening being's purity of willpower, establishing that enlightening being's power of supreme resolve, clarifying that body of interest of enlightening beings, producing that goodness of intent and thought of enlightening beings, evoking that effort of enlightening beings, equipped with a mind of firm commitment and tireless consistency, with unrelenting energy and determination, imbued with unshakable power of faith, with an indestructible mind, follower of the instructions of all spiritual benefactors, with the perspective of sane knowledge, on the verge of all-sided purity, coursing in the purity of unobstructed knowledge, imbued with the light of the principle of the universal I, illumined by the mystic formulations of all stages of enlightenment, his mind directed to the differentiations of the planes of the cosmos, aware of the pure essence of forms unfixed anywhere, intent on the sphere of absolute unity with no attachment, having purified the medium of powerful knowledge of all ideas, having broken through the boundaries of all spaces, progressively distinguishing the realms of worldly planes, progressively distinguishing the realms of planes of reality, intent on the manifestation of the vision of the variety of abodes of Buddha, knowing about the distinctions of realms of time, his intellect bearing the radiant wheel of the teaching, his mind illumined by the light of the treasury of concentration of universally radiant knowledge, mentally and physically according with the stage of universal perspective, his mind illumined by the lightning of knowledge of those who realize thusness, realizing the exaltation of faith in omniscience, never without the exaltation of faith in the Buddha teaching, filled with the exaltation of the empowerment of Buddha, illumined by the inherent mental light of all Buddhas, hearing the vow to penetrate all networks of worlds with his own body, intent on putting all universes at once into his own body, made his way gradually to the country Vanavasin, arriving there after 12 years.